Good evening. It's amazing I can hush the crowd by just standing up here. You're very well behaved this evening. My name is Rod Bigelow. I'm Executive Director and Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at Crystal Bridges, and I'm so glad that you've joined us this evening. To begin, I'd like to state our Indigenous peoples acknowledgement. As Crystal Bridges in the Momentary, we recognize our roles as settlers and guests in the Northwest Arkansas region. We acknowledge the Caddo, Quapaw, and Osage, as well as the many Indigenous caretakers of this land and water. We appreciate the enduring influence of the vibrant, diverse, and contemporary cultures of Indigenous peoples. We are conscious of the role in colonizations that museums have played. As cultural institutions, we have a responsibility to engage in the dismantling of historical and systemic invisibility of Indigenous peoples, past, present, and future. We choose to intentionally hold ourselves accountable to appropriate conversation, representation, connection, and education to facilitate a space of measurable change. This evening, I have the great privilege of welcoming acclaimed photographer Steve McCurry. The program is co-presented by Canopy NWA, a group of Northwest Arkansas residents that are working to create a community where refugees are welcomed and equipped to build new lives. But before the conversation, I would like to send a great amount of gratitude to our sponsors of the Distinguished Lecture Series, Del Monte Foods. Would you please join me in thanking Del Monte? They have sponsored our series for many, many years, and we're incredibly grateful. And I also want to thank all of you who are members of the museum. Could you raise your hand if you're a member of the museum? Oh, that's amazing. Thank you. Give yourselves a hand. And also a thanks to our staff and volunteers who make our programs work every single day. They are well worth the applause, I promise. I'm honored to introduce Steve McCurry this evening. For more than 40 years, Steve has been one of the most iconic voices in contemporary photography, with scores of magazines and book covers, over a dozen books, and countless exhibitions around the world in his name. Born in the suburbs of Philadelphia, Steve studied film at Pennsylvania State University before going on to work for a local newspaper. After several years of freelance work, Steve made his first of what would become many trips to India. Traveling with little more than a bag of clothes and another for his film, he made his way across the subcontinent, exploring the country with his camera. It was after several months of travel that he found himself crossing the border into Pakistan. There he met a group of refugees from Afghanistan who smuggled him across the border into their country just as the Russian invasion was closing the country to all Western journalists. Emerging after being embedded for weeks with the Mujahideen, Steve brought the first images of the conflict in Afghanistan to the world, putting a human face to the issues on every masthead. Since then, Steve has created stunning images on all 7 continents. His work spans conflicts, vanishing cultures, ancient traditions, and contemporary cultures alike, retaining the human element that made his celebrated image of the Afghan girl so powerful. Steve has been recognized with some of the most prestigious awards in the industry, including the Robert Capa Gold Medal, National Press Photographers Award, and the unprecedented 4 First Prize Awards from the World Press Photo Contest. The Minister of French Culture has also appointed McCurry a Knight of the Order of Arts and Letters, and most recently, the Royal Photographic Society in London awarded Steve the Centenary Medal for Lifetime Achievement. Joining Steve in conversation this evening, we have Khalid Ahmadzi, Director of the Economic Advancement at Canopy NWA. Khalid was born and raised in Kabul, Afghanistan, and after the fall of the Taliban in 2001, he assisted with the reconstruction efforts in Afghanistan through various non-governmental organizations and helped to start the first co-educational international school in Kabul in 2005. After obtaining his master's degree in public service in 2016, Khalid returned to Afghanistan to work with Turquoise Mountain, a nonprofit that works to support local Afghan artisans. In 2018, he returned to the US and began working with Canopy NWA. Khalid is also the owner of Rumi Afghan Rugs, and through Rumi, he supports Afghan weavers and hopes to spread the untold stories of Afghan artisans. Please join me in welcoming Steve and Khalid.
Thank you all for coming. Honored to be here with you. This is one of the most amazing museums I've ever been. I've been to a lot of museums around the world, but this is among the very best. So it's an honor to be here. And before you start, we have some Afghan friends here tonight, out here in the audience. I'd like to give them a special welcome. And we can talk more about that later.
Yes, I just want to thank you all for coming this evening. Among us, we have the staff from Canopy, but also we have some Afghans here. So you know who you are and where you are. So this past few months has been very difficult for any Afghan, whether in the US or around the world, and those Afghans who lived or lives in Afghanistan. It is when we were deciding about or discussing this event, that was summer, and Kabul and Afghanistan was in a different light. And who would have thought that this timing of this event would fall where things are very dire at the moment in the country. So thank you, Steve, for coming. And we'd like to make it as conversational as possible. Sure. Steve and I talked in the back, and the first time I think we met was in 2002. And then the second time we met in Kabul was in 2009, and then in 2010, and then lo and behold, here in Northwest Arkansas. Yeah. So thank you.
Great. Yeah, pleasure.
Thank you. So I'll start the first question. It's actually from my daughter, and she wanted to know why you decided to be a photographer.
Well, I went to school. I went to Penn State University, and I was trying different things. I thought, well, maybe filmmaking would be interesting. So I studied cinematographer, and one of the course requirements was to take a class in still photography. And I got a camera, started taking pictures, and I just connected with it instantly. And one of the great things about doing what you love, and particularly photography, is I've never really had to work a day in my life because I just love what I do, and it's just a lot of fun, tell important stories, get to meet people, travel, and for me, it's probably the best way to use my time. Travel inspires me, and it kind of, I'm always reminded that we have this common humanity, and you know, I'm as passionate today about photography, traveling, as I was back when I first really jumped into it with both feet in 1978, and then in Afghanistan in 1979.
Mm-hmm. I know probably the last 2 years have been difficult of traveling, and just also you're known for being a photographer of portraits and with masks. I think that's putting that things in a different angle. Steve, I know you're more than that one click of a picture you took of Sharbat Gul, which is the iconic picture of that became the symbol of refugee. And Sharbat Gul is also more than that one picture. And I think so. Looking back to where you started in Afghanistan, tell us a little bit about one of your adventure stories in Afghanistan when you went to the country. And I know there you spent a lot of time in Afghanistan. So do you remember one story that jumps out to you tonight?
So I was in India working, traveling, photographing, and I had lived through one monsoon, and I was coming up my second. The subcontinent gets crazy hot, like in May, June. I mean, it's unbearable. So I thought, you know what, I got to go someplace cool up in the mountains. So I thought, okay, I've never been to Pakistan. Let me go to Pakistan. And it was really hot in the plains. So I thought, okay, let me go up in the mountains. So I got a Jeep. I got a seat in a Jeep. I told you I was one of like 10 people. And I went up to a place called Chitral up in the kind of the Hindu Kush. And it was very cool. It was very beautiful. It's sort of like Aspen, Colorado. And I'm, reading some books and relaxing and walking around, doing some trekking. And so I'm in this hotel. It's probably like a $1 a night hotel. You know, there's a bed. Well, it's kind of a rope bed, and there's one light. Bathrooms down the hallways, somewhere else. And but in this hotel were 2 Afghan men. So, I see them coming and going. We talk. Sometimes we'd have lunch. And they started telling me about this war that was happening like over the mountain, literally over. It's like maybe a 4-hour walk, 6-hour walk. It's really close. They said, this problem's happening, this war, this, they're bombing our villages, and you're a photographer. Nobody knows about this in the world. We want you to come in and tell our story. And I never photographed an area of conflict. I was just, and I thought, well, that sounds really dangerous. I'm not sure I want to do that. No, come in, you'll be with us, we'll show you around and stay in our villages. So I kind of reluctantly agreed to go. And said, okay, when they said, we're going to come for you this morning, and then we're going to start the trek. So I was lying in bed thinking, I'm praying, I just hope they don't come for me. I just hope they, this probably was a mistake. So I laid there in bed, and then they came. Again, I thought, no, now I have to go. So we walked up and down the mountains. I thought it was going to kill me. Because the Afghans I was with, would get up before sunrise to pray. And then we'd start to walk. So it's like first thing in the morning, we're walking up and down these mountains. And I was 29. So I was kind of strong, but these guys were just running up and down these mountains. And then I'd stay in their villages, stay in their homes. And we had, getting there was so much fun. They had such a great sense of humor. We were just kind of, if there wasn't anything to eat, we'd shake a mulberry tree and get these berries from the tree, and we walk. And they were so hospitable. We go to their villages, and I got to tell you, some of the best meals I've ever had in my life were Afghan in these villages. I mean, dish after dish, and just coming fruits and meats and rice and biryani and all this things. It was amazing, as good as any restaurant you'd find anywhere. Eventually, we got to the area of conflict, and then I kind of started to see firsthand. Well, I got to go back a minute. As we walked over the mountain, the first village we came to was completely and utterly destroyed. There was not one person living. They had destroyed every home, And because in this area called Nuristan, they were one of the first to rebel against the government. And the government, to kind of teach them a lesson, went and started bombing villages. And they were unyielding, and they just were not going to submit. And at that time, there was the Mujahideen, as they called them, was this ragtag bunch of farmers and shepherds and kind of villagers. They had these old, Enfield rifles, and they took the fight to the government. And I was, for me, this was an incredible story. Because,
and what year we were talking about?
79. I went back again like 30 times. I went back in 80. I would go back several times a year. It was, I got to know people. I got to know, incredibly, I could walk around this part of Afghanistan alone, literally without a guide. Not a lot, but I would walk from village to village, totally safe, incredible hospitality. And I remember them dancing at night. And that, like, I don't know if it happens now, but it was incredible to see these Afghan tough guys, dancing around. There was a fire, and they were kind of. It was incredible. But they were suffered heavy casualties with the helicopter gunships in particular. They would come and kind of systematically bomb the villages. So it was like, and you think, why would somebody put themselves in harm's way to take a picture? It doesn't really make any sense. But I mean, some people are built that way. I just thought this was an important story. I thought it was something new. It was an adventure. It was somehow, it was important to me to, tell their story. And so I said, I kind of went back over and over again.
Yeah. I think when it comes to Afghanistan conflict, you're one of the very few people who, through your photography, brought some attention to the conflict in Afghanistan, and so things have changed, and now it turned to. Have you been to Afghanistan during the Mujahideen after the fall of after the Russians left? Did you go back during the Civil War, which was from '92? I see in the pictures there were some of the conflict, the Civil War that happened in Kabul. And tell us a little bit about that experience.
So with all these Mujahideen fighting, and some, just like the recent case, the Mujahideen descended on Kabul, and then they started fighting among themselves. And parts of Kabul were utterly destroyed. I mean, literally, it looked like Dresden or someplace, in World War II. And there was the city of Kabul was kind of empty. The electricity was practically non-existent at times. And it was a very dark time. But it was. There was one. I remember this one period. There was one of the warlords, one of the commanders, his name was Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, and he would send in like 1,000 rockets indiscriminately into Kabul, just randomly. There could have been more, and at any moment you could get hit by one of these rockets. There were these Katyusha rockets. They were, like 8 feet long. And I would go to the Red Cross hospital, and there were just, the hallways were just lined with children, women, just guys that were out working the field or whatever. It was just incredible to see how the whole thing had disintegrated, which was once shepherds and farmers coming together to, to defend their culture and their villages and their way of life, kind of devolved into this sort of, ugly kind of power grab. And I got my room. I was asleep at 2:00 in the morning, and there was a knock on the door, and I thought, oh no, man. I was the only guest in the hotel. That tells you something right there. So I knocked on the door, and I said, I knew there was a guy at the screen. I was on the ground floor. He started cutting my screen with his knife. So I just let them in, and they just took whatever they wanted. I was just glad that they didn't, kill me. And that happened, a few times. Stopped on the road and give me your money. They didn't want cameras. They just wanted cash. So they were tough days. And then eventually, so I think what happened was the United States saw there was an opportunity to stick it to the Soviet Union and kind of get them into kind of a Vietnam scenario and kind of bleed them, and which is what happened. I mean, the Russians took massive casualties and thousands of tanks and trucks and helicopters, and then they decided got to go. This isn't working. And then once the Russians left, or the Soviet Union pulled out, then the Afghans were on their own. Everybody kind of walked away, and then boom, civil war or war among the.
Yeah, it's sad that we are kind of experiencing the same situation again. That the world is kind of beginning to wash their hands from Afghanistan and leaving it back to the tough era. Did you travel to Afghanistan during the Taliban the first time when they were in power?
Yeah, I was there in sort of '96, something. We drove in from Pakistan, and I met a Taliban representative in Jalalabad. He said, "You're not allowed to photograph any living thing, not even a bird." And I thought, well, that's kind of extreme. But I was there for a couple of weeks, and it was a little tough being there with the camera. They didn't have a sense of humor about photography.
So after the fall of Taliban, if you could stop at this photo, I think we're gonna go back and talk a little bit. So the Taliban was after 9/11, they were toppled, and so the new government came, and there was a lot of hope and a lot of freedom that people felt, and millions of Afghans returned back home from abroad where they were living as refugees, and there was the sense of hope rekindled in Afghanistan. So were you? What took you back to Afghanistan after the fall of Taliban? And I think they will go back to this picture of Sharbat Gul.
Well, I think there was a sense of hope. A lot of Afghans were coming back, start businesses, helping the government, and it just looked like the whole thing had turned around, and now Afghanistan was finally going to have peace. And I went all over the country. It was mostly safe. After 2002, we went back to look for Sharbat Gula, and because there were so many inquiries about, who is she? whatever happened to her. So we thought we'd go back. That wasn't our main mission when we did the documentary. We thought we would kind of look for her for some period of time, and then we were going to go from Peshawar to Kabul. But once we started to found a teacher where she had been in the school that day, we started feeling like we were getting somewhere. And then when we eventually, we met a man who said, "Oh yeah, I know her brother," and "Oh yeah, she's living in an area of Nangarhar province." Then we got very excited, and we were able to actually meet her, and actually then sort of start to talk to her and her husband about, now we want to help you. What can we do to help you? And basically, ever since, we've been in contact with her.
And it's safe to say it's a public news right now that she's safely in Italy.
She's in Rome. That's right.
She's in Rome. Yeah. So she's safe with her family. But this is one picture. How many, when you're taking the picture, how many shots of Sharbat Gula you captured this initially? Because we see one, but there's a little
there
more.
Weren't so many. I was using film. Maybe I don't know, maybe 10. Sometimes especially with film, you're inside and it's you need a lot of light, and sometimes you shoot more because you don't know if there's going to be camera movement, or it's going to be because of slow shutter speed. So you take several in case one's out of focus. So I kept kind of shooting, and I think this was the first time she had ever been photographed. So I think I've always thought that part of her expression is a bit of curiosity about, what's this guy up to? Who is he? And what's that? The camera? And this is unusual for me. And then after a few frames, I was photographing other students in the classroom. Then she got up, and I guess thought I would photograph somebody else. But I almost didn't stop. It was a girls' school, and I was going actually for lunch, and I thought, well, maybe I should check this out, because it was just these voices, and I thought, and I realized it was a school, and showed the teacher my permit for the camp, and as soon as I saw her, I thought, well, she had a really striking face. But I didn't see the film for 2 months, and I didn't really know what was on the film, and you kind of forget about it after a week or two.
And so, where are the other 9?
I have them in
Are we gonna see that at some point, or?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. This picture, again, as I mentioned, that became a symbol of refugees around the globe. And in another picture, in 2015, some of the audience might remember, or those who are watching, there was a child who was washed away. His name was Al Kurdi, and on the shores in Turkey. And what happened? That triggered something in the conscious of the world to see what we can do in the height of refugee crisis in Europe. And as a result of that picture, the image, there was a group of concerned citizens in Northwest Arkansas. They gathered together to talk about what can we do to help refugees. And as part of that grassroots movement came Canopy, the organization I'm honored to work with. And it's so since the beginning, since we started, we have resettled closer to 300 or more than 300 individuals from some dozen of countries here in the U.S. Thank you.
I wanted to, in the last month or so, there's been a lot of, particularly Afghan refugees coming into, in Maryland and other places. And I've wanted to, I've been thinking, how can I help get involved? And I think organizations like Canopy is great because you can actually do something, you can volunteer or do something. But it's a hard, I mean, we know they're out there, but to actually do something to help them is kind of hard. Like, who do you call? It just was, I couldn't figure out how can I jump in the game here. And if they're Afghans, I live in Philadelphia. If they're Afghans in the Philadelphia area, how can I don't know, have them over for dinner or ask about, about education for their kids or whatever. And it's like, I kind of wanted to do something, but I didn't know who to call or whatever. We talked earlier about maybe there's an Afghan photographer who I could help or advise or whatever, but who do you call? How do you connect with somebody like that?
If you've noticed, the table's turned now. Steve is asking me questions. The refugee crisis has been going on. For the highlight in the past 3 months was Afghanistan, but the refugee crisis is an ongoing situation. There's more than between 25 to 30 million refugees worldwide. And refugees are, the definition of refugees is somebody who's forced out of their country because of their religious belief or their political affiliation or religious persecution or those terms. And so they are, and they're outside their own country. And so we're talking about 25 to 30 million people. That's the size of the entire country of Afghanistan that we have worldwide. So the crisis of refugee has been going on for years and years. And now with what happened in Afghanistan, there's another wave of attention about the situation. So the U.S. has been historically since 1960 has been that's when the refugee program started. Has been resettling refugees in the U.S. Every year. There have been some times when the numbers went down, and there were some times when the numbers went back to normal. And that is what the political things that was going on in different eras. There are 9 agencies in the U.S. that resettles refugees. In Canopy, Northwest Arkansas, our affiliated organization is Lutheran Immigration Refugee Services. That's based in Maryland, but we are one of the many sites they have in different states. So when a refugee arrives here, as you mentioned, what can we do? We have a co-sponsor team that when a refugee arrives, we pick them up from the airport and take him to, because they're resettled. They're more than refugees, they're our new neighbors. We help them come to their furnished apartment or house that we prepare in advance. And and after that, it's the co-sponsor team that comes in and kind of befriending that family or individual, and as they're going through their journey of moving to the U.S. and learning about the different things that everything is different. I had to do that too when I moved here. So that's that process, and so we are meeting afterwards, and if anybody wants to learn more about Canopy or how they could get involved, we'd be more than happy. Our team is here. I see that we'll be able to answer your questions. Steve, now that Afghanistan has gone back to this different era, and that yes, the pictures could go on. So now that Afghanistan is in this different setting that it is now, what would you, because photos is slowly coming to, there are some barriers for photography as well. And so what are your what do you think, like for journalists? Do you consider yourself a photojournalist? You're a photographer? What category of you consider yourself?
Well, I think I would just think of myself as a photographer. Early in my career, worked on a newspaper. I did some magazine photography. Now I travel with my wife and daughter around the world, and we go to projects, and mostly personal photography. I have a 4-year-old daughter, which keeps me on my toes. And but we've traveled extensively together. So I kind of think of myself first as a dad, and then I do photography kind of on the side.
Okay. Okay. Well,
It's a little bit of a joke, but I'm still working. I mean, for me, photography is it's my art. It's the way I love to photograph, and it's something which I'll do for. You never retire. I'll just keep working. It kind of gives my whole life purpose, and it's very satisfying. So, yeah.
that's wonderful. Can we go to the next photo? Yeah. So this. When did you take this picture?
Well, this was in 2002, 17 years after the first one. So she came to meet us with her husband. We had to get permission from her husband. Well, together they had to agree. But we talked extensively about how we can give back to her, what can we do for her, and we talked about all sorts of things. You can see that she's now this is another time of her life. She's older. The light was different. It's a different kind of a picture, but I think she was I think she was very happy that we were finally be able to guarantee her family security, education for her daughters and her son, and so
That's wonderful. There's one question here. So when did you realize the impact of this photo would be so impressive? Was there a time that you look back?
Well, I think that it's been a slow progression over the years. I have to say, I've had some taxi drivers in New York and Washington who we just talk some from Afghanistan. I say, oh yeah, it's great. Where are you from? And then they realize I know a lot about Afghanistan. And the conversation goes, and I tell them I made this picture, and they get really excited. And I promise you, at the end of the ride, they said, "Don't give me any money. I don't want any money for the ride." Of course, I paid them anyway. But this is very typical Afghan. They have a real pride in the country, and I think they thought she was very dignified. She exhibited kind of perseverance and fortitude and unyielding, head high. We're going to move forward against all odds. And I think they very proud that she was representing Afghan people in that kind of a way.
Mm-hmm. And what would be your just if you talk right now you have you're in front of audience and there are some Afghans who just left Afghanistan. What is your advice if you would give one about and also the audience about Afghan culture and Afghan. I heard about Afghan food, and we do want an Afghan restaurant.
Yeah, I have a friend who started an Afghan restaurant in Canada. I got to say one thing. In my house, I have to tell you, I have so many Afghan carpets. I have Tibetan carpets, but most of my carpets are Afghan. Pound for pound, Afghan carpets are the best in the world. I've been all over the carpet world, Morocco, Turkey, you name it, India, different places. The best. Yeah. Anyway, that's my 2 cents about it. He's an expert, by the way. But no, seriously, I spent so many afternoons in carpet shops sipping tea, and I got really good at bargaining. Really, I got it down to a fine science. I know, and I bought so many carpets they were stacked up in my closet until I got my house in Philadelphia. Now I'm able to put them everywhere. I was in a very small 1-bedroom apartment in New York, and I literally had like 3, and now I can put them all out.
Yeah, that's. I'm a carpet enthusiast too. When I got my first salary, the first thing I bought was a pair of shoes that fit, because my my mom always bought extra large shoes, like you're gonna grow into it. But by the time I got that, and the other thing was carpet. I got so many carpets, kind of collecting, that my mom said, not like that's enough, so no more carpets.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, now I have hundreds of them in my garage now.
Yeah.
So that's.
But going back to your question about Afghans, I think that we all came here. My ancestors came, from Scotland, Ireland, and my wife is Hopi. She was the original people on this land, so it's always interesting to have conversations about that. But I think that, and the ones I met here, you can see they're very alert, and there's something in the eye that you can tell these people are going to do really well. I think that Afghans are hardworking. Yeah, I had so many translators and assistants and fixers in Afghanistan, and it always was a pleasure. So I think, work hard, here, and, I think it's just, but, nothing's easy. We talked about photography. Photography is like an impossible profession. There's no jobs. Magazines and newspapers are for photography. That's impossible. And what I've done in my life is increasingly more and more difficult. But I think with hard work, you can do almost anything. I think, there were years where I was up before dawn, out there working at sunrise, and then on the street or wherever after sunset, every day for literally years. So I think that you can do almost anything if you really apply yourself.
Well, thank you. We'll open it for some questions from audience here for the remaining time.
Can we keep moving with the?
Yeah, if the photos could.
We had 400 pictures there.
Yeah.
You have to stay. Everybody's going to have to stay until we go through all the pictures. So.
Yes. Question from audience. Okay, so how to be a good judge? Your hands. Yes, sir. The mic would.
So my hometown is 2 hours northwest from here in Parsons, Kansas. And I moved here to Bentonville in March, however, but I've been here more or less over the last 2 years. And I know Kodachrome, the last place that developed it was Dwayne's Photos in Parsons, Kansas. Yeah. And both my aunts worked there in high school, and it's a kind of a meaningful place for me, obviously. And I know the last film that you developed was there at Dwayne's in Parsons, Kansas, at the cemetery. Did you hang around that area? And if so, have you done a lot of photography in the Midwest in recent years since then? I'm just curious about that.
Well, that film, that roll of Kodachrome, I had 36 exposures on it. The last 3 exposures I got to, it was Parsons, and yeah, I got to 3 frames left. And it was like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I thought, what am I gonna do with those 3 frames? So I started driving around town and made a couple of pictures, but that was, I tried to do a different subject for each of the 36 frames. I started with Robert De Niro. I went to India and photographed a couple of the most famous actors. I photographed some nomads. I stopped off in Turkey and photographed one of the great photographers in Turkey. And it was a great project. And they made a movie, not about me, but it's called Kodachrome with Ed Harris. And they talk about the same process of. Kodachrome was a great film. I shot it for 20 years. I had probably 1 million slides of Kodachrome, Ektachrome, and then some Fuji. But I shot a lot of film. And it was a lot more difficult shooting film than digital. Kodachrome was unforgiving. You had to be spot on. And, otherwise, and it was really slow. You could never shoot in dark situations.
Mm-hmm.
But, digital is like a breeze compared to film.
So have you emigrated into digital world completely?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm fully digital. I think it's great. You can work in, it's much more forgiving and work in low light. And the pictures, the quality is extraordinary. I use the Leica. The quality is astonishing. Good, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And another question?
We have one on this side, Khaled.
Okay, sorry. Yes.
Just putting it out there, has the museum here approached you about acquiring any of your pieces? I think they look great on the French gallery wall next to them.
I think we couldn't hear the question.
Has Crystal Bridges approached you about acquiring any of your pieces?
Not yet. I'm ready. With great pleasure. No, this I've been all over this is better than most museums in the world. There's the right. All the great museums. This is bang up right on. It'll give any museum on the planet the best museums that run for their money, and probably beat them.
Okay. Is it the time? Yes. One more question. We'll just go. Okay. Do I say? I'm sorry.
Can I just say one thing? I was in Pakistan, Peshawar, in like '89, and there was an eye doctor who I met there, and I think they were supposed to come here tonight. I don't know if that person's in the audience. Is that you? Let's meet afterward. You know what? I was with some Mujahideen in. I was walking from Jalalabad. We were crossing this field, walking towards, and there was an Afghan army post up on the mountain that saw us and started shelling us. And we had this afternoon walk, and some of these shells started falling, and we just started running. And this one shell landed fairly close. It just blew me off my feet, and I got up and I started running, and I realized that I lost kind of sight out of one eye, and it was kind of cloudy. And I went to this eye doctor in Peshawar, and he looked at it, he says, "You have a cataract." And I thought, well, really? And so, yeah, that was, and I never knew if there was a relationship between that, those shells that were falling. Literally, this one just blew me off my feet. And I got up, and we just running for our lives. And then several days later, I went to him, and he said, "Oh yeah, you have a cataract."
Yeah. Well, look at the connection.
So let's meet after what I was going to say. Hold on.
Yeah, the connection of. So I see a hand at the very end. Yes.
Hey Steve, my name's Sam, and I'm actually an artist myself. And I think around, I don't know if it was more than 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I was in junior high, and my parents gave me a digital art tablet, and I was learning how to paint and illustrate, and I always loved your photo of the Afghan girl, and I remember emailing you as a kid, and I asked you permission if I could paint that piece for my school project, and you said yes. And so I just wanted to say thanks, and people like you. Just want to say thanks, and people like you are the reason why I'm still making art. So thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. This is beautiful.
Was there another question over here? Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yes. Yes. We'll get that. Yes, ma'am. Oh, the mic. If you can, I think the mic is coming. We have to be. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say that I feel really privileged to be here because you're my favorite photographer, and I'm an aspiring photographer myself. But I know that you've taken, I don't even know how many pictures, but I wondered if there was a picture that means something in particular to you, like one picture or a couple pictures that stand out to you as your favorites or the most meaningful ones.
Well, I kind of think of my work, I see it as one like large body of work, and I like different pictures for different reasons. Sometimes you like a picture because it was like impossible to get or really difficult. You had to walk for days or whatever. And other pictures you like because they were kind of like very effortless. And the other times, you like the composition or the emotional component in the picture. But so I don't really kind of single out a picture. I mean, sometimes I have a picture of a dust storm in India. Sometimes if I'm in a particular mood, I'll say that's my favorite picture. But just it's more just the kind of choose one just randomly.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of, there's pictures that I like that nobody else likes. Someday I'll do a book with my favorite pictures that nobody's ever seen. Or unpublishable pictures. People say, well, of course it was unpublishable. Why'd you publish it? They're all lousy pictures. Yeah, no, yeah. That's
Well,
let's grab this.
okay. We'll pass the 8 o'clock time, but we'll ask some.
Oh, yeah.
We'll get some questions here.
I noticed that a lot of your subjects are not smiling, and I was wondering if you directed them to do that, or if that was just the way that it worked out.
Yeah, I don't direct. I mean, the people in the street, the people I meet, I kind of am with them long enough to find kind of the picture that I think I think my picture, I'm kind of wanted, I see them and there's something I see and I kind of wait. And I have pictures of people smiling, but I prefer people more of a neutral look without the mask, without the kind of the awkward. I love this picture. That's my favorite picture right there. I love that hairdo, man. If I had enough hair, I'd grow one of those. What was the question? I forget.
Do you tell your?
Oh yeah. So I think that again, I'm looking for that neutral expression. I'm looking for something where it's calm, they're relaxed, and they're more. It's sort of like if you and I were talking when your face is relaxed. I'm kind of looking for that. So I don't direct them. I'm waiting for that kind of neutral, and that's my kind of style, and I kind of feel that's what I'm looking for. Somebody else could look for something completely different, and that's fine. I mean, I think the great thing about life or photography or approaches to black and white or color or Leicas or pinhole cameras or 8x10 view, it just depends on what gets your juices flowing and what motivates you and what inspires you. And there's no right, there's no wrong. I mean, the Leica or a Holga plastic camera, if you like to use a Holga or a pinhole camera, it's, I always say that I'm going to be dead in a few years. It doesn't matter, just as long as I'm satisfying my creative, urges and trying to do something meaningful and having have it be fulfilling in my life, and that's all that really matters. So. Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you for coming. It's such a pleasure to be here. My first time here, was blown away. I mean, I thought this is about the most amazing thing. Going down this trail, this road, and boom, just unbelievable.
And we hope that it's not your last time coming to Northwest Arkansas. We would like to see more. Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.